Okay guys, so I'm going to be uploading a little presentation here. It's about 30 minutes long, focusing on some artists from the AIDS crisis that we didn't quite get to this semester, hence the focus for your final exam being on AIDS and the AIDS crisis. So I will be uploading this video. I recorded it earlier this year, so if you hear anything about like other students or whatever, just to give you kind of a general overview of these artists, I'm going to be uploading this if you want to watch it. That's totally voluntary to you. But it might help with you working your way through the final exam and its ideas. So the first group that really is part of the AIDS crisis in making art and protesting is ACT UP, which stands for the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. They were formed in March of 1987 at the Lesbian and Gay Community Service Center in NYC, and they did a lot of acts of civil disobedience and nonviolent protesting. A lot of it had to do with die-ins that they did, in which they laid down with these tombstones and talked about sort of the deaths or the amount of deaths of those who have contracted AIDS or HIV. They tried to fundamentally change the way the government and scientific community research and develop medical advances, and it really helped to lead the way in the discovery for AIDS treatments, such as this one here, after their demonstration at the FDA. It opened up more access to experimental drugs. They also filed a lawsuit against Northwest Orient Airlines in the June of 1987 when they refused to allow people with AIDS from flying. So a lot of these misconceptions really led people to do kind of drastic things, right? Not even letting people with HIV fly, which is ridiculous. But at the time, we have sort of this misunderstanding of the disease as a whole. And so, along with a lot of their protesting that we can't talk about to too much extent in this class, because we could go over a lot of things that ACT UP did. We're going to go through here just a couple of them. I have 3 or so, and then we'll go into Keith Haring and Grand Fury and whatnot. So the first one here is in this January 1988 Cosmopolitan magazine. And the reason I bring this up is because of this article that was published in Cosmopolitan that caused a lot of controversy at the time. It published an article by psychiatrist Robert E. Gold stating that unprotected vaginal sex between a man and a woman who both had quote-unquote healthy genitals, there was no way either could contract HIV even if the male was infected. So continuing that we have all of these doctors and the psychiatrists coming out and blaming homosexuals for transmitting this disease, along with the fact that they're stating directly that even if a heterosexual male has AIDS, he can't give it to you if you have heterosexual vaginal sex, which is ridiculous. So we have all these misconceptions that ACT UP and all these groups are sort of trying to change the language and dialogue about these ideas. So they do this also. They protest against that Cosmopolitan magazine, and another one of their famous protests is Day of Desperation on January 22nd and 23rd in 1991 in New York City. They did a demonstration in Grand Central, putting up posters such as one AIDS death every 8 minutes. And the night before, they went on CBS and interrupted the host of the show. Let me open it up here. So they interrupted Dan Rather on CBS in 1991. Here is sort of a clip of that.
And the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Watch. It's the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. We're going to take a break for a commercial just now. Break for a commercial. Thank you very much. At the McNeil Lehrer News.
So in this video, they were shouting, "Fight AIDS, not Arabs. AIDS is news," having to do with the amount of money that was being spent on the Gulf War and abroad, why all this money was not being spent on AIDS research when so many more people were dying from the disease in New York City at the time. Other works that you've probably seen, Silence Equals Death Project. From what I can gather, some groups have sort of claimed to be the owners of this image. I'm not 100% sure who can sort of claim the rights to it, But what I gather is that there was a Silence Equals Death project that was founded in 1987, and then ACT UP and Grand Fury utilized this poster in their demonstrations. So I've read a lot of articles saying that Grand Fury invented it, ACT UP invented it, but I don't believe that's the case, but I could be wrong. But it definitely became a big symbol of AIDS activism and the movement at the time, and was utilized by ACT UP and by Keith Haring, which I'll show you here shortly. And one of the reasons that this poster becomes so popular is because of the pink triangle and the reclaiming of the pink triangle. So during World War II, you have the use of the pink triangle in Nazi concentration camps to signify a homosexual individual. So you can see here, you would have this upside down pink triangle. So a lot of this triangle was about reclaiming this symbol from the Nazis, from oppression, as a symbol of power for the LGBTQ community. And so they did that with this Silence Equals Death poster. There was also sort of conversations about this poster that it was made in reaction to William F. Buckley in 1986, who said people diagnosed with AIDS should be tattooed in the upper forearm to protect common needle users and on the buttocks to protect the victimization of other homosexuals. So you can imagine sort of the anger and fear that's going on at this time, that you're even talking about tattooing people so that people can tell if you're homosexual or not, or if you do drugs, or whatever. And so this triangle and connecting with the Nazis, and then this oppression that they're experiencing again in the 80s and 90s, really sort of all connect to one another. So Keith Haring obviously becomes a big part of ACT UP. He's a big artistic figure in this scene at the time. He was diagnosed with HIV in 88, and he creates work from 88 to 90 when he dies from AIDS-related complications. But he becomes a huge part of ACT UP and does a lot of work for them. And again, using this Silence Equals Death, Fight AIDS, ACT UP, as well as the pink triangle. He also used a lot of this see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil in the Silence Equals Death idea, and using his little sort of well-known figures. Again, the pink triangle. A lot of his work are very funny, very comedic, and kind of fun looking, but at the same time they're sort of communicating this very sort of dark historic problem at the time that he is personally experiencing. So he really has a great involvement in ACT UP and promoting safe sex and trying to encourage people to protect themselves against contracting HIV or AIDS. Grand Fury is another big group that sort of comes off of ACT UP and is sort of like a subgroup, I would say. Their work was named after, or their group, that is, was named after the unmarked police cars of the NYPD as they were driving around Plymouth Grand Furies at the time. And they used a lot of marketing to reach out to people, like billboards, like buses, like sort of mainstream media images to sort of grab people's attention. So you have posters like this: government has blood on its hands, one AIDS death every half an hour, and AIDS Gate at the bottom there. I brought it up so we could read it because it's kind of small. Come on, work for me, please. Okay, oh, that's fine. 54% of people with AIDS in NYC are Black or Hispanic. AIDS is the #1 killer of women between the ages of 24 and 29 in New York City. By 1991, more people have died of AIDS than the entire Vietnam War. What is Reagan's real policy on AIDS? Genocide of non-whites, non-males, and non-heterosexuals. Silence Equals Death. Again, their work and a lot of work of ACT UP started dealing with Ronald Reagan's inability to sort of talk about what was going on at this time. He didn't even say the word AIDS until 1987. He really kind of was staying out of the conversation and not talking about it, which also really connects to silence equals death, right? He's not talking about it, and he's not encouraging work and funds to be pushed to finding treatments for AIDS or HIV. And so a lot of the work does revolve around Ronald Reagan's lack of participating in this problem. One of their most famous works is Read My Lips, which sort of turns into this marketing campaign called Kissing Doesn't Kill. So the Grand Fury made a series of posters that said Read My Lips with different couples kissing on them. And eventually they made this sort of, they put it on buses and billboards, and it was kind of supposed to be this image that looked like advertisements and media at the time, and maybe it looked like it was advertising for clothing, but instead it said kissing doesn't kill, greed and indifference do. Corporate greed, government inaction, and public indifference make AIDS a political crisis. So they were putting this on subway cars, on buses, and sort of driving around New York City, trying to get the word out about these ideas. Other works that they did, Art is Not Enough, which is a really interesting and phenomenal work by them. Art is Not Enough sees power through direct action, my body, my mind, my choice, saying that making art is not enough. You have to protest, you have to act. Other works like Sexism Rears Its Unprotected Head, Men Use Condoms or Beat It, AIDS Kills Women, with lots of penis imagery. And puns, right? Sexism rears its unprotected head. Another one had to do with the Pope. We had the Pope at the time coming out and making sort of ill-advised statements about AIDS and the sort of Catholic Church's stance on AIDS. This includes this poster includes an image of Pope John Paul II with a quote from Cardinal O'Connor, Archbishop of New York, at the First Vatican Conference on AIDS in '89. He said, "The truth is not condoms or clean needles. These are lies. Good morality is good medicine." And so again, all of these, you even have Catholic figures and religious figures coming out and saying that the way that you get AIDS and HIV is through having bad morals or being gay. So they made this poster. The Catholic Church has long taught men and women to loathe their bodies and to fear their sexual natures. This particular vision of good and evil continues to bring suffering and even death. By holding medicine hostage to Catholic morality and withholding information which allows people to protect themselves and each other from acquiring the human immunodeficiency virus, the Church seeks to punish all who do not share in the peculiar version of the human experience and makes clear its preference for living saints and dead sinners. It is immoral to practice bad medicine. It is bad medicine to deny people information that can help them end the AIDS crisis. Condoms and clean needles save lives as surely as the earth revolves around the sun. AIDS is caused by a virus, and a virus has no morals. So you can see sort of all of these political and religious constructs that come into the propagating of these lies and misinformation that is allowing the AIDS crisis to go on. Again, here, Daniel Moffat, he was part of Grand Fury, and he did this work, He Kills Me, again, referencing Ronald Reagan's inability to speak about this crisis. Photography is also a big part of AIDS activism. And I find that a lot of these works speak really to sort of the personal nature of AIDS and the stigmas, and really trying to bring some of these ideas and issues back to the people who are actually suffering from this disease. So Nicholas Nixon, for example, with his series People with AIDS, in which he sets out to sort of tell the truth about the epidemic. He followed the lives of about 15 individuals suffering from AIDS and HIV, and carefully communicated and told each individual story to sort of stir the emotions in the viewers. So his wife, Baby Nixon, wrote, little paragraphs and information about each one of the individuals. He also used large format cameras to capture detail in these strict black and white images. So really just about communicating the suffering, the difficulty between people, between families when they find out their loved ones are suffering from this disease, and really not about who is gay and who is straight, but sort of communicating human nature. And it's really horrific to sort of see these people that over several months they start to just deteriorate, um, and lose their body mass, and you can sort of see them slowly dying. Nan Golden did this as well with her Ballad of Sexual Dependency from 1978 to 88. She photographed HIV and AIDS in the margins of the society where she lived in New York City, surrounding the LGBTQ community, as well as some of her heroin-addicted friends in subculture. And so a lot of her work was not only just capturing her as an individual, but it also became about capturing these individuals as well and sort of what they were going through. And so this work, The Ballad of Sexual Dependency, is a 40-minute slideshow of about 700 photographs set to music that chronicled this life and sort of broke down the elements of some of these issues about the homosexual community, as well as cataloging some of the issues with AIDS and HIV at the time. Nan Golden also lost her friend Cookie Mueller. She died of AIDS-related causes, and this really sort of struck Nan Golden and took her to a really dark place, which is a lot of the reasons why she started to really get involved in sort of this crisis and eventually being involved in ACT UP. This is a quote from her. "My photography in the end didn't do enough. It didn't save Cookie. But over time, my photographs and other photography about people with AIDS has helped. It has definitely given a more human face to statistics. We need to keep putting images out there, but not ones that are digitally manipulated like almost everyone is doing now. We need to have reality instead of this believable fiction crap that's become so popular." So she really encouraged people to go out and to really see the truth in images and photographs. Katherine Opie did this a little bit as well. We talked about her work ever so briefly when we talked about gender performance, but Katherine Opie started photographing a lot of her LGBTQ friends and family members with these blank, bold backgrounds, to sort of capture that these people are humans, right? The humanity of these figures who are suffering from real problems, real diseases at this time. She also connected some of this with her leather community and some of the issues with how people think about homosexuality and the leather scene in New York City. So sort of connecting it to that and kind of that imagery as well. Felix Gonzalez Torres is probably one of the other most popular artists revolving around AIDS and the AIDS crisis. A lot of his work focused on the death of his lover, Ross Laycock, as well as he died of AIDS complications as well. But a lot of his work revolves around sort of love and loss of that really important relationship to him. So some of those works included are Untitled Perfect Lovers from 87 to 1990. This was a work in which two battery-operated clocks are sort of a symbol of their relationship, and Gonzalez Torres makes it so that these clocks are only slightly off by like ever so many seconds, and over that time they slowly become more and more and more out of sync. And it was really about lovers and their relationship, and thinking about how sort of love falls out of sync, falls out of being connected with one another, as well as potentially fearing for the limited time together that he had with Ross, his partner. He also created a series of billboards called entitled Absent Body, which were memorials to his lover Ross, um, that featured an image of his empty bed with the two pillows and the rumpled sort of bedspread. And he created about 24 of them through New York City that really represented the loss that he experienced from the loss of Ross. Probably his most well-known work at the Art Institute of Chicago is Untitled Portrait of Ross in LA, which consists of 170 pounds of candies that are individually wrapped in multicolored cellophane and piled in a corner. And this 175 pounds of candy represents so this 175 pounds represented the weight of Ross when he was healthy, and visitors are encouraged to sort of take a piece of candy, and slowly over time this work deteriorates and becomes a representation of the deterioration of Ross's body as he struggled with this disease. So the sweetness of the candy is also comparable between the love between the afflicted person and the one who is there to support them in sort of this sad deterioration, but also it becomes kind of a memorial to Ross's life in that the candy is always replenished and always built up to the 170 pounds again. So kind of made this work that so it could be recreated and to sort of rethink his life and bring it back as well. Another work I think that Julia mentioned in her response was entitled Death by Gun, that was inspired by a Time magazine article where 460 people were killed in America by gunshot during the time. And Gonzalez Torres did another work in which he made these sheets of paper that you could take one of them, and it told you all this little information about these individuals and how they died, and so really talking about gun violence in this country as well. Okay, just a couple more of these that I'm going to touch on here quick. Aziz and Kutcher is another artist set that I gave out. They are a couple together, a homosexual couple, and they created a series called Chimeras from 1998. They're a series of prints. They seem to show a mixture of what seems to be technology covered in skin. The project was named for a mythological creature, the chimera, and a mixture of a lion, goat, and a dragon. It also can be interpreted as an orgasm containing a mixture of genetically different tissues formed by a process such as fusion of early embryos, grafting, or mutation. So this work really is about Kutcher, who was diagnosed with HIV and deteriorating quickly, and the different biological and biotechnical things that were available to him at the time made it possible for him to survive. And so a lot of these works, specifically Chimera here, are about this connection between kind of machinery as well as skin and flesh, so connecting to HIV and AIDS and their struggle with that personally. So they're kind of weird, kind of grotesque, but sort of represent that idea. Andre Serrano is very much in the same boat with his series. He did a series of immersions and bodily fluids in which he utilized these different liquids of blood and semen and urine and combined them into these images. In Hunter's response that he wrote about Andre Serrano, he said, "From what I could find, the thing that most links his work to the discussion surrounding AIDS was his choice of raw materials and making his pictures. His series, Bodily Fluids, was produced entirely using things like breast milk, blood, urine, and semen, especially in New York, where the spread of AIDS was the highest in America. This would have instantly connected his work with these issues and discussions. At this point in time, it was public knowledge that AIDS was spread through the exchange of bodily fluids, whether it be through drug use, sex acts, or otherwise. So he was using these materials as a conversation about some of these issues that were occurring." So a very different take on some of these ideas, but still kind of thinking about how AIDS is biologically transmitted through bodily fluids. And Andre Serrano does a lot of work with bodily fluids, so it kind of makes sense that it connects up with his work. The last couple here that I want to mention, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on their work, but just sort of a mention of some of their work that connects to AIDS and AIDS activism. Niki de Saint Fale wrote an illustrated book, AIDS, You Can't Catch It Holding Hands, while she was working with a Swiss immunologist and AIDS specialist. And it was written in the form of a letter to her son Philip, and it has this very sort of characteristically colorful style that she's known for. And so she talks about some of the um, information and ideas about how AIDS is actually getting transmitted to help people sort of deal with the lack of information that exists out there. So this book is really fun. She has a lot of silly little images, but it really is about communicating some of the unknown information to people. So use a rubber. What do you think of these? It may not be your cup of tea, but it will save lives. If you want something, give money to aid for AIDS or give your time visiting the sick or the stricken. Other ways people were so afraid of getting AIDS so easily from individuals, but she lists all these different ways that you can't get AIDS, which is kind of looks like a children's book, right? Um, Two other artists that I'm going to stop in here are David Wojnarowicz. He died of AIDS complications in '92, and this is an image of himself with a story about this is him in the center and how his life sort of went and what it meant for him to suffer from AIDS and sort of the things he had to tolerate as a homosexual man. So you can take a look at this and read it through. And then the final one is Masami Teroka from AIDS series Women in Fox. He found that people in Australia in '89 had no idea about AIDS and didn't understand sort of the issues with it. So he started creating these Japanese print style images connecting to AIDS and some of the issues with AIDS. So figures with condoms and that sort of thing. So you can definitely take a look at some of their work. I don't want to sort of take up too much of your time as you research for your final project. Let me know if you have any questions and concerns. Otherwise, I will talk to you all next week.